Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about whether or not the RF 28-70 f2 lens actually replaced my RF primes. Okay, so I want to share my perspective with you guys, and that's the perspective of someone who's owned the RF 50mm and 85mm 1.2 lenses for a while now. And these lenses really have been my go-to lenses for all of my paid sessions. But I was intrigued about the idea of having the 28-70 because it would be cool to have one lens throughout the entire day where you didn't have to think about switching lenses or take the time to do that and potentially get dust in your sensor. So I did check out the RF 28-70 lens and I did fall in love with that lens. It's an amazing lens, and if you haven't checked out my review on that lens, I'll link that above. After using that lens for a while, I did have a hard time deciding whether or not I wanted to keep some of my RF primes. What we're going to do in this video is look at some photos and kind of compare the characteristics of each lens, and then I'll share with you my decision that I made on whether or not I kept the primes or the 28-70. To me, the RF 28-70 is a portrait first lens, and I say that because while it is a general, standard zoom range where you could potentially use it for anything, it would be hard to kind of use it for landscape just because of its size and its weight. You wouldn't necessarily want to be lugging that around for longer distances. And obviously the performance of the lens itself, given its autofocus speed and, zoom range, is going to be limited for applications like sports and wildlife. So personally, I would purchase this lens with the intent of using it as a portrait lens most of the time. Before we go on, I want to set something straight. If I had the money, I would definitely keep the 28-70 along with my 50 and my 85mm, but that's a given. But as you know, these lenses are super expensive, so it doesn't make sense for me to keep all of them. So I really wanted to see how this lens stacks up in rendering when I'm shooting it at 50mm and at 70mm to compare it to my current primes that I have right now. I do shoot in a lot of backlit scenarios, so I wanted to see how each lens handles the flare and ghosting. When I was shooting with the 28-70, I was really surprised on how well that lens handled flare. One thing I never really liked about the RF 85mm 1.2 lens is that it's hard to control the flare in that lens without the whole picture kind of getting washed out. And you can see that in these pictures where the RF 28-70 does a better job in keeping that contrast and color over the 85mm. Whether it's wide open or stop down, I do really enjoy the look of the flare on the 28-70. I am finding that I also like the flare on the 50mm 1.2 because you sort of get this like semicircle that you can use to frame your subject with. Getting into a little bit more of the technical side, if we're talking about lens aberrations and how well the lenses correct those aberrations, then the 50mm and the 28-70 are going to fall behind in that category because the 85mm has that BR element. That being said, I haven't really found that the aberrations are difficult to correct in post. In terms of sharpness and overall resolving power, these lenses are really similar in how much detail that they can resolve and how sharp they are. The only thing that I do have a preference of is that with the 28-70 at the longer end 70mm, you do tend to lose a little bit of that sharpness shooting wide open. And I actually prefer that for portraits because with the RF 85mm, it's so tack sharp that I find that I usually need to go into each photo and do a lot of retouching to sort of make it pleasing to the client. Most clients don't like to see all of the wrinkles and their pores, and you really get all of that with the RF 85mm. So if you are shooting with the RF 85mm, or if you intend to purchase that lens at some point, you should know that you might need to sort of change up your workflow for retouching to kind of expedite that process. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the 28-70 f2 is not sharp. at the longer end. I'm just saying compared to the 85, it's a little bit less sharp. If you've been watching my videos since I started on YouTube, then you know I switched from Nikon, and the primary lens I shot on when I did have a Nikon body was the 58mm 1.4G. For anyone who has used that lens, you know that lens is relatively soft when shot wide open. So going from that lens to these super sharp RF lenses has been quite the transition. So here we have a series of portraits that I took where you can get the general idea of the rendering of each lens. As you can see, when you're shooting with the 28-70, you still get that really nice subject separation, and the quality of the out of focus background is really nice. And here is the 85mm 1.2 lens, and here you can see it's just a completely different level of how out of focus your background is. So if you're really going for that subject separation and isolation, then you definitely will probably want to go with the 85mm 1.2 lens. Next up, we're comparing the RF 28-70 at 50mm f.2 to the 50mm RF lens at 1.2. While I do find that the 28-70 is still really pleasing, and considering it's a zoom lens, I do think that the rendering of the out of focus areas is still really smooth. I do prefer the 50mm at 1.2. I do think that it has more character, and it just in general is a more pleasing photo. Shooting with the RF 28-70 was so much fun for me that it literally had me ordering the lens, and it was just about ready to ship, and I canceled the order because it's not something that I need right now. And you know, if I had the money, if I had a bunch of extra cash, I would definitely buy that lens. But I really need to focus on what I need for my business, and I need to be intentional about the equipment that I buy that is gonna kind of push me more towards video over photography. And I see the 28-70 as more of a photography lens, just because some of the features of the lens don't really lend itself to being a great video lens. Like the type of USM motor that it has is a little bit noisier, and also there's a lot of focus breathing in the lens. So while I still might sell my 85mm to trade it in for something else, I would be much better off with a 70 to 200mm lens over the 28-70. But I will say, if you are just starting out with acquiring RF lenses, the 28-70 is an awesome purchase, and I do think that it's worth the money, even at $3,000. It's such a versatile lens, and the quality and the rendering of the lens is absolutely amazing. And whether you're doing photo or video, I'm sure that that lens can get you really far without the need of acquiring any other lenses. For me, I can't give up my favorite lens, which is the RF 50mm 1.2 lens. This lens to me is super special, so I will not be giving this up. But let me know what you guys think. If you were in my shoes, you know, knowing that I do a little bit more video now, would you go with the 70 to 200, or would you just stick with the RF 85mm? The 85mm is an awesome lens, and I've been using it a lot for professional work. I just feel like the reasons that the lens is awesome are not really that high on my priority list, like how sharp the lens is and how well corrected it is. So yeah, I'd love to get your opinion or your perspective, so definitely let me know in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've been thinking about doing a 50mm comparison, so the RF 50mm 1.2 to the 1.8 lens. So let me know if you guys want to see that, and I will talk to you later. See ya.